Hello and welcome everybody to the 12th episode of State of CS. I'm here with Yanko and also Vendetta, and yeah, we're just going to be catching up on everything that's happened in Vegas. Well, not everything really, but most of the stuff that happened in Vegas, and obviously what's coming up. So how are you guys doing? Everyone alive still?
Barely, but I'm trying my best to stay alive, Anders. So we'll see how that goes.
Yeah.
How was your travel home, Yanko? First of all, I don't know how yours went.
It was long, of course. You know what the worst thing is? So okay, this is what happens. Me and Anders have like flights almost at the same time. Mark from Dreamhack is on the same flight as Anders. So they're like gates E, I'm gate D, and I see like theirs are to the right, mine is to the left. So I hang out with them, we get some food. Then they need to leave for their flight. So I still have time. I walk around, like buy some souvenirs. And then it's like, oh, like 30 minutes left till my flight leaves. Maybe I should go and board. And then I see that the D gates are actually like another terminal. Like you need to take a train below the runway to get to that terminal. So I'm like, fuck. And I start like running for it. And I like barely make it. I was like the last guy to board the plane. After like we spent 15 minutes, you know, wrecking like Alex and Henry for missing their flights and a bunch of other people.
Nico,
I almost like get fucked by the same thing. So that's how the trip started, and I didn't get to sleep all that much. I think I slept something like 14 hours in the last 3 days. So
nice.
good shit.
Well, that is the Vegas experience for sure. Ven, you're in Norway, but I heard you still managed to screw up your sleep pattern regardless.
Oh yeah, of course. I mean, it's kind of standard, right? The best part is like normally, well, as you guys know, I'm kind of on an NA schedule in that sense when I'm just in Europe, which is fucked up enough. I managed just to fuck it up to like West Coast NA at this point, obviously because of Dreamhack and everything. But yeah, went to bed at 5 yesterday. So good waking up 5 hours later. And man, you know, European time zones, man, it's a bitch.
Classic.
Especially if you're from Europe.
Yeah, exactly. Like that's what it's the worst. Like hard to deal with.
I love it. Right. So I mean, we sort of had the conclusion. I think personally one of the best storylines ever. I love the idea that Taz, like everyone says like, but that's not what Kirby meant. I don't really care what Kirby meant so much with that tweet. I love the fact that Taz just sort of jumped on it and said, we're going to destroy you. And then they did that and they won the whole tournament. I think that's incredible. And I think it's really good for Counter-Strike that we have these kind of sort of, you know, friendly light rivalries. There's no way that you can seriously think that Taz sort of hates, you know, Astralis or anything. But yeah, I think it's really great. So I don't know, how do you guys feel about that? Would you guys have rather it be SK that won? Like I mean, that would have been a different storyline, but I think this VP one is amazing.
I feel like it's such a good way to. It's like, you know, well, Revenge of the Titans in the sense that they were playing so well at the major. They were playing, or you know, getting so close to actually close it out. They probably, you know, or in their eyes, they feel like they should have closed it out at the major versus Astralis. And then Taz to make the statement after seeing the tweet from Kirby, I don't know, it just kind of felt right. You know, it's like a movie script. So to me, I preferred seeing VP win in that finals.
I think Duncan made a great point about that on the desk, saying that, or actually he tweeted it out, saying that like Taz kind of needs something like that to an extent, like to light a fire, because the guy has played like for more than 10 years. I mean, in major tournaments and winning a bunch of them. So, you know, trying to maybe even force a rivalry like that a little bit, just so that he can be motivated more. And you could see it in the game versus Astralis. Whenever the camera switched to him, he was just like in full Zen mode, fully focused, didn't care about anything. So, you know, if that tweet from Kirby provokes that in Taz, then that's awesome if you're like a VP fan, right? If that provokes that level of determination to beat your opponent. So anything that can get you into that state of mind, I think is great. Even though, like, I agree with you, Anders, that Kirby didn't really like mean anything bad by it. You know, it was just like an emotional tweet after they just won the finals.
Yeah.
Well,
I mean, go on.
just a quick note. that's the one downside of having players in booths nowadays. That's what I miss about the old school LAN events and old school CPL events, because you'd have much more interaction in between players. You'd kind of build up that rivalry, and I guess in a more authentic way than over social media. Obviously, like, this is, I guess, the closest we're gonna get these days. But I really like the fact when players actually got at each other. It's not, anything. There's no violent tensions or anything like that between them, but it adds to the storylines between certain teams.
Yes, it does. And this is actually a really good point, especially when it comes to Taz, because he was like the king of doing that shit, wasn't he? Just standing up and yelling at people on LAN and telling them that they're going to destroy them and laughing in their faces when they're winning, which I always thought was one of the funniest things. So when this was happening in like 13 and 14, when people actually still went to Copenhagen games to play games, there were always going to be a video, at least one or two videos on like the early Reddit, or even just a little bit on Facebook or whatever. Someone would like post a video of Taz yelling at whatever 14-year-old he was playing, which is obviously great. The reaction was really negative from the community side. People would say like, "Oh my God, that's so bad-mannered, and this will never be a professional sport if he's acting like this." Obviously completely unaware about how people talk to each other in regular sports. But I always thought that was a shame, and I think Taz sort of toned it down a bit. But I actually went and asked all of the pros back then, and I said, does anyone not like playing Taz because of this? Like, is there anyone that said, I wish he would stop or something? And everybody, I think everyone I talked to, like 6 or 7 people I talked to, all said, no, we just want to beat him even more. Like, we love it. It makes us so focused. We love like trying to get back and see if we can make him shut up. So yeah, I kind of miss that aspect of it too. I actually think that's a lot of fun. I think maybe it's one of those things where like the community policing becomes too much, and it tends to sort of it shuts down some of the player personalities, and that's a bit of a shame. I think everyone understands that there's obviously a line that you can't cross, that where it does really become very personal. But I've never seen Taz cross that line. I've never even seen him get close to it. So I don't know how you guys feel.
Here's a thought for what we could potentially do. Instead of miking up teams to the point where you have communications like their TeamSpeak or whatever during games, you actually just have a feed going from one booth to the other that you can like shout into a mic in between rounds just to get into the head of your opponents. I would love that.
Or at least have it like it was before in matchmaking or whatever. So at least at the halftime,
yeah,
you could talk to each other. But yeah, that's a funny point. I remember when we were playing in 2013, like our first international tournament in Vienna. It was like a hotel setup, right? And the players were like one group was playing in like a square. So each side of the square is one of the teams from the group. So we were playing our first game against Lemon Dogs, who were like right next to us, not the opposite side, but like I was on the left corner and the guy who was playing on the right corner was like 2 meters away from me, right? So we were like, no one knows who we are, obviously. And we came like super prepared. We were playing like our best map. And we just started like shouting after everything, like after each round, each kill, like just getting into their face. And they were all, and we did this like on purpose because we saw that they were just all like kids. They were all like 16, 17 or some shit, We realized we could get into their head. So we like lost both pistols and we still won like 16-8 or some shit. We just like wrecked them and they were like, what's going on? And I remember Hooch and some of the CIS guys were like warming up or something and we were just shouting because obviously they do that shit as well in Russia, Ukraine and all of that stuff. It's the same culture pretty much. They were just like cheering us on and you could see him in one of the videos. He was just like, da, suka! That's awesome. But it's actually, it can be effective. I mean, obviously not when Astralis plays VP nowadays, right? Because it's all experienced players. I don't think it would change all that much, but it was could definitely have some fun with it back in the day.
Yeah, for sure. That must have been Mad Cats, right? The Mad Cats tournament, I think.
Yeah.
Talking about just in case anyone wanted to go and Google it. I think Richard was there doing that was when Richard was still doing commentary.
Didn't Mad Cats Vienna have that insane overtime versus Navi and Titan, Berry games at the time, like 31-28 on Inferno? Was it Mirage?
And I just remember on Mirage, I think it was. And I just remember this. Me and Kassad were watching the game, and you just see after the game ends, or actually it was one of the like crucial rounds, and Starix just missed his spray completely or some shit. He got CS gold, and you just see him like doing this exactly. Suka. And that's where you can see that like that Navi lineup was like never gonna work, because like some of the players, that was when Senya was still in the team. That's like some of the players were really like not enjoying the game at all, basically. So
yeah, I think Western Wolves were playing in that tournament too. Someone should go and find like those VODs, because actually some really fun games were played. Obviously a while ago now, but definitely a good time. So I think that's some of what is that sort of, it gets taken away from the stadium events, and it's very hard to recreate. And I mean, obviously, no one wants to make it artificial. You were pointing out, like, what if you were pumped, like in the halftime? What if you pumped the other team's audio into the booth? And like, you can obviously sort of recreate the whole tournament setting so that it does become sort of more reality TV, right? And not so much a competition. But I feel like if you take it completely away, that actually in some ways is sort of messing a bit with the tournament feel. That's a reason. That's something I noticed actually a while ago. Sometimes, like for instance, for the Katowice qualifiers, I think it was in 15. Could that be true?
The one that was held in the whole.
Yeah. I'm sorry about that. I've lost all track of all dates, so I just I could have been off. But yeah, so in 15 when we did that, something you notice, and you notice it specifically with the teams that they're so focused. Like it's a different level of focus. Everything is about the competition, and everyone is like, whereas if you're at stadium events, people tend to go somewhere else, and then they show up and play their game, but then they go back to the hotels, and like it's. I'm not saying stadium events are bad, but it's just that there is like a level of focus, and that's I don't know. I wish they could have both. I wish we could have like that intensity, but on a stage, and then everyone would just be cool with it.
Well, talking about stadiums and stages, like the Vegas stage was fucking sick. It's like the 361 for, if anyone hasn't seen the tournament at all, it was like the stage was in the center, so like all around it you could basically see the stage. It didn't cut off the arena in half or something like that. And the only time we had something similar was actually Dreamhack 2014, right? But it was like way smaller. It was like just at Dreamhack Winter at the time. That was a major tournament. But yeah, I think it looked sick. Unfortunately, I mean, no way to go around it. The arena was empty to an extent. It looked that way. The problem is when you don't cut off an area of the arena with the stage and you just have the whole stage to fill, that's like a 17,000 seater arena. It is a bit unfortunate. But for example, if they go for the same thing in Malmo and have the same crowd they had for the last Masters tournament, I think it's going to be insane.
Yeah, I would love to see that. I think it's an exceptionally good setup actually. But I think what we're learning now, and we did kind of learn the same thing at E-League, and we have learned the same things in the past at other stadium events, is when you sell these sort of multi-day tickets, especially if they're like 3-day event tickets, you can, on paper, have sold out all the tickets. So you have 5,000 seats, you sell 5,000 tickets, and yet on the first 2 days, you only get 3,000 or even 4,000. But that's a problem because the stadiums really do look empty if you're missing 1,000 or 2,000 people in there. You could see all the empty seats, and it just gives a bit of a weird feel because everyone just says, oh yeah, maybe I'll come like for some of the games on the first 2 days, but I'll definitely be there on the final, right? So I don't know. I'm sort of starting to wonder now if it isn't worth it in some ways to say, if we want to have these epic tournaments where we have all the best teams there, maybe there is a future in which we just say, okay, we'll do the group stage and the quarterfinals from a studio somewhere. Then we will do 2 of the semifinals in one venue, one city. We sell all the tickets and people just show up on that one day. And then we do the finals, different stadium, different city, and then, spread out with like a week between or something. And then obviously the whole point is those teams don't play, each other in online tournaments or some shit in that week, right? Yeah. But then you can build all the content. You can even have the teams, really build tactics for each other and watch demos. They get real prepared, and we can always talk about it, and we can, find all these cool points. Like, I know it. Maybe the problem here is logistics and money. That it costs a lot of money. But I feel like if we just disregarded all of that, it'd be a more fun product in some ways than having half-filled stadiums and and 4 best of 3s in one day and stuff like that. It is a pretty big ask to tell people, hey, do you want to come watch Counter-Strike for 12 hours in a row, and travel to Vegas. That's a lot.
Yeah, for sure. I mean,
this is how sports works, isn't it? I mean,
yeah, they never do multiple games in a row, right? And they have shorter games just in general than what we do most of the time.
Must feel good to be sports talent.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that for one, the players would be against it initially, like 100%, like having to leave a final for 2 weeks after they play their semis or something like that, or even a week. But then again, players started hating initially the fact that they can only play one map or one game a day, because a couple of years ago, for people who are new to the scene, you would have tournaments where you would play like multiple games a day. You would play a round robin or GSL, doesn't matter, group stage, but you would play all of those games in one day. Now you have like initial games day 1, loser and winner games day 2, and decider games day 3.
Yeah.
So it would take some getting used to from that side. But if you're talking like purely, like we forgo everything that's going on right now in the scene, and just like as a theory craft enders, like that shit.
Yeah.
That would be kind of a like NFL Super Bowl system, right? Where you have like playoffs every week or every other week, and then you have like 2 weeks off before the final game. I think that could be a lot of fun. I think that it would be cool to see it just being tried out, to see what actually happens. But it's so hard for me. I'm a realist, Anders. It's so hard for me to imagine all those things, knowing like what the landscape is right now. It's just not like possible in any foreseeable future.
Yeah, I think the benefit that traditional sports have in that sense, like if you take NFL, right, they only have one league to care about in that sense. And the fact is, like, sure, maybe Dreamhack could do that for the next Masters, where they do group stages and playoffs, and the finals 2 weeks apart, kind of a deal. But then you'd have to take into account that in the meantime, there's going to be another tournament that teams are going to attend or want to attend, or they have online games and everything. So you might not get that, sweet scenario where, like you mentioned, right, like the 2 finals teams don't play each other in between. Like that's very unlikely to happen just because how packed the schedule is. But I guess in a perfect world where every event organizer decides to come together and say, like, we're going to do it this way, and then plan the schedules accordingly and cross their fingers that none of the playoff teams are going to be the same as well, right? Because otherwise you're going to get overlaps. They're like, it might work out, but I think it's like what Yanko said, the fact that, if you try to be realistic about it, it's pretty tough to make happen unless you have one league to rule them all.
All right, so maybe one of the few times that the realists actually win a point here. I kind of like that.
I mean, in the end, it's all a simulation, Anders. So how real can you be?
Yeah, that's a good point. I like that. What else we obviously cannot forget about is now this is the first time we've had the new Inferno being played at the tournament.
Hell yeah.
I was really excited, and I think everyone was actually. I didn't see any comments where someone said, "Oh damn, I wish we could get those 2 back." It seemed like everyone was just fully on board with this change. How do you guys feel about how that map played? Did it play up to the hype? Were the games as good as you were expecting? What's the initial take on Inferno back in the competitive pool?
I mean, for me, again, super excited about seeing the map back in the pool. I think it was 2 weeks notice that teams had pretty much from Inferno being announced until they knew that it was going to be at Vegas as well. Yeah. So obviously limited amount of practice time. So I think we saw a lot of teams kind of just sticking to what they knew in terms of how they played out the old Inferno, which didn't excite me too much, obviously. But, I take all of that with a grain of salt just because I know the map is so new. And we got a lot of messy games. I think Fnatic were like the exceptional example to see how weird a new map looks for a new team, even though you knew that the old Fnatic would have been, absolute gods on that map. But I don't know. I was still excited to see it in the pool. Did provide with some entertaining games, even though the play wasn't necessarily as crisp as you'd hope.
Yeah, I think that I like the new Inferno. In general, I was very curious to see how teams approach like the new banana control, the B defense, and all that stuff, because that's the most crucial thing. After you can't throw the smokes from CT, the deep banana smokes and all that stuff, go for early banana control. So you can see more and more teams like trying. I mean, more and more teams. We only from the games we saw this tournament, and that was mostly North. Actually, you see them like give away banana control, and then like after a certain amount of time, like mid round, they try to clear it or go for control of banana. They have a very cool thing where they throw the deep banana smoke, but from like B, and they throw 2 mollies as well that cover almost all of banana, and they did it against Gambit, and they basically got 2 kills with the mollies, and we're like in a 5v3. So you can see small adjustments like that. I think it's still way too early to tell. I don't think it's going to be like Nuke, where Nuke initially was just a bargaining chip in like a veto. So you get like, oh yeah, we can play Nuke, so that someone has to ban it, because in the beginning no one wanted to play it. I think there's going to be a lot of things who are going to try and implement Inferno in their map pool like straight on, because like a lot of teams played the map before. It hasn't changed that much. Like it's not a completely different map. It's like you need to you need to figure out some small things. So yeah, I think it's going to become a staple map in the pool yet again.
Yeah, I don't see any reason why it wouldn't be, especially because if you go back, obviously back to the days where Inferno was in the pool, was there literally any team that didn't play Inferno? Because I think Inferno was just like, it was just set as a base. Like if you want to play at a certain level, you have to have Inferno in your pool, regardless of, necessarily how low on the tier rankings you are. You just need to know how to play a basic Inferno, and then you'd remove it depending on whether or not you play a team that's way better than you on Inferno. But if you ended up in a situation where the vetoes are not favored to you, likelihood of ending up on Inferno as a kind of a level playing field was more than likely.
Funnily enough, I remember the old Dignitas lineup now being North, who were like playing Mirage, Overpass, Cobble, let's say, as their first 3 maps. Maybe not Overpass, maybe something else. No. Before the Columbus qualifier. So they come to the Columbus qualifier for the major, and they like Inferno is their like 4th map, the new map that they like started playing or whatever. And they get it against Renegades, I think, at some point, and they lose to Renegades. I know they lost a crucial like Inferno game, which ultimately like stopped them from qualifying for the major. So the Danes yet again, Anders, fucking things up.
Yeah, that's how it works, isn't it? I mean, I'm really curious about how this version works. I think there were some comments on HLTV. I think Threat was saying he didn't feel like he was playing all that differently from the first version. I think that might be too soon to comment on. But I think Threat is smarter than I am anyway when it comes to Counter-Strike, so I'm not going to like try and disagree with him too much. But I really look forward to it. I think it's seeing the development on that map. But there are obviously some teams that you would think should have a good way to become champions on it. Like you certainly hope, didn't you, that Fnatic were gonna sort of like just roll right in there. We actually, I think in the pregame for that game, we talked about was like the Crimson Olofmeister combination over at B and all the good stuff that we're sort of used to seeing, but it didn't really work out all too well for them. And that's a bit weird in general. I mean, I think Flusher had a comment where he said, we're only now just sort of rediscovering our motivation to really play, all of us together. And then that was some of what was, lacking. And now we're really all going to get back into it. But both the Fnatic sort of the reformation of that team, but also the G2 lineup that everyone's been waiting for forever and ever, having Shox and Kenny the same team, they both seem to be in a bit of a weird spot. Are they both projects that, like come a year too late or something? Has the meta game moved on from those projects working? What do you guys think about that?
I mean, well, for me, I don't think that's necessarily too late. It's all dependent on what kind of mindset they come into it with, right? Like it's like Fletcher said, right? They're now just rediscovering their motivation as to wanting to play and actually put in the time and effort to get good, if you want to put it that way. And I think the issue that for a lot of the top teams or any team that has had an era in the past is the fact that they get complacent and they get too reliant on playing the same old way for an extended period of time, to the point where other teams figure out how to play it, and whoever was on top isn't willing to make the necessary adjustments to stay there. So I think it's not necessarily about what kind of lineup you've had gathered up or anything in terms of G2 or Fnatic. It's not like they've become lesser players in that sense. It's more down to how they actually choose to approach the game more than anything else.
Yeah, I agree completely. I tweeted this out when the news was finally out that they had those new rosters. That doesn't matter. Like, both teams need to change the way they played the game compared to like the old Fnatic, the old G2, the old EnVyUs, whoever, because I think Vegas is one of the best examples. Sure, the group was like not that easy. I mean, Fnatic had to play VP in the decider. They were probably expecting to play Gambit, but still, that Fnatic lineup never went out in groups. They made top 4 every time except at MLG Columbus, where they lost to Astralis, of course. I can see Anders smirking already. So, and also the statements after those losses are like, yeah, we are just together for a week. We need time to practice and all of that stuff. And sure, that's a legitimate thing to say, but can you imagine that team saying that a year ago? I don't think so. I think they just come in and crush everyone. G2 as well. They lose to Heroic in the Katowice qualifier. Now, Again, Heroic is not a bad team by any stretch or by any means. Basically, I really like that team. But that G2 lineup, the amount of talent and firepower, again, a year ago, you expect them, and they probably would just cruise through that qualifier, even though they, just started practicing the day before the qualifier. So I think that those are like good examples how the times have changed, and also how not just the meta game, but I think more than anything else, the average skill level of teams and especially individual players has really risen in the past year and a half. So you can't really be as dominant. The gap between an Olofmeister and Valde is not as big now, if there is any actually, with Valde as it was maybe some time ago.
Yeah. I think, some of the really epic lineups that we've had in history, some of them really have. I think the most obviously glaring one was when NIP had the 87-0 record. There were so many rounds when you go back and watch those games where it's like get right in a 1-on-3, and if you hear the casting, if you hear us talk about it, it's like, I would give him like a good, 55% chance that he still wins this, and it's like that doesn't happen anymore, like it's so hard now to win 1v3s because all those 3 players alone could win and almost any duel against you. So it is sort of even more miraculous now when those things happen.
And it's not just that. In those situations, it's also the players they're finally becoming more disciplined, Anders. So they don't do dumb shit in a 3v1. They don't think, oh, I killed 2 guys. I have 2 teammates alive. What could possibly go wrong with me going for this overpeak here? And stuff like that. So usually when you see like a highlight move in general, it's not just that player making a great play. It has to be a little bit of a mistake or miscommunication from the opposing team. But yeah.
No, I agree. So just my quick thoughts on it. I think it's going to be more difficult for the Fnatic team to try and sort of make that lineup change their minds. I think the lineup can work, but in terms of sort of readjusting mentally and saying, okay, maybe we have to play a slightly different game, or we've got to find like the right mental pieces to get everyone up and rolling, I think it'll just be more difficult. Whereas I think for some of the French players, they have been at like lower depths in their careers, like they know what's at the bottom, some of them, and it's also that many of them, it's not that they don't have any chance to do anything else. There's so many other French players out there they could play with if they wanted to, but I feel like maybe they feel more that this is supposed to be it, and I think they're going to have an easier time to get to that road, funnily enough. I'm not too, it does suck that they lost to Heroic, but I'm not too worried about the G2 lineup right now. I think it's just, to take a while, make that project work one step at a time. I think people had more the expectation that Fnatic were going to be sort of, straight off the bat rolling. Another line that I'm much more concerned about right now is the NIP one. They were also a DreamHack. Obviously, G2 won a DreamHack, just in case you were not paying attention. But yeah, the NIP one they did make the playoffs at least. But what can we say about this? I mean, ultimately, not the NIP performance that most people were looking for.
Yeah, it's not just the fact that they lost in the playoffs. Sure, they lose to Astralis, who was, viewed as the best team in the world. But it's also that they feel like they need to pick Inferno. That tells you they have no confidence in playing one of their strongest maps against Astralis. They just believe Astralis is better than them at any map, and they feel like they need to go for a curveball by picking Inferno and try to win there. And they got crushed something like 16-6, 6-5, yeah. So I don't know why, because even Threat was there. You'd expect them to be more disciplined and, more coordinated with him behind them. But it actually wasn't really that different from the last time we saw them.
Yeah, actually, just to follow up on that point. Actually, the fact that for DreamHack Las Vegas, coaches were allowed to actually do in-game leading, right?
Yes.
Did like all the rules, they could talk all the time, and they had like 1-2 minute timeout.
Exactly. So knowing that, like let's say you didn't know about it until you arrived to Vegas, did that change any of your perception of how the tournament was going to play out? Like knowing that Na'Vi are going to have the opportunity to have Starix talk the entire time, or FaZe, well, not FaZe necessarily because they've gotten Kerrigan in, but yeah, Nip and Threat, those kind of things.
The problem with that is even those teams who have like coaches who would like them to in-game lead, perhaps in an ideal scenario, but let's say now is the best example, right? They can't really there's no point in having Starix call the whole time if for the next tournament, and especially for the major, it's going to have to be seized and, a bunch of other tournaments. So from what we've learned at the event, it was mostly like the players who were in-game leaders, they were calling, but the coaches just simply because they could talk like in a round, they could basically just give an idea or maybe make a mid-round call or something like that. But the majority of calling was still being done by in-game leaders.
Yeah, and I mean, doesn't that also just come off the fact that it would be risky to try and change all of this up in the middle of a tournament when then the next one that you're going to be playing, and especially maybe the future majors that you're going to be playing, you won't be able to do this anyway. So even though I think especially NiP and Na'Vi are the two teams that sort of really need that, for Na'Vi it seemed like it turned out that Zeus actually did much more than maybe people gave him credit for on that team, and that now they would really need Starix to be the one to do it. I can understand if Seized and maybe exist on NIP were thinking, well, yeah, but if we let you guys do this now, then next week or a couple of weeks from now, we're going to be in trouble because then now the team will have halfway adjusted to doing these things. What I don't understand is, do none of these players like Seized or Exist or whoever is going to be doing the calling in IP, why can't Threat or Starix or whoever sort of rub off on them over time, Why can't they learn just a bit of it so that, you do all the preparation before you get into a tournament and then, all you really need is a timeout, right? The timeout for someone like Threat to come in and say, oh, remember that thing we talked about and I was trying to do this. Like, it seems like that doesn't happen nearly enough then. If you want to do the other, or if you're forced to because of the rules, then more should happen, right?
I think that's actually the way easier part of in-game leading, right? Is like getting into a game with a prepared game plan and having an ideal, scenario in your head, how it's going to work out, and then having like contingencies for different scenarios. But the biggest problem is like mid-round calls and adjustments, right? It's the problem. It's not a problem of having an execute, it's knowing when to use it and what to change mid-round or mid-half if your opponents are doing something you didn't expect. So it's easy for Starix to create a playbook for Seized and give it to him and say, Seized, these are the strats we have for, train, just call. but the intuition to know when to call what. Sure, now you can also start training, okay, you need to start off with a default, that you need to hit A, then when they move more people towards A, that's when you can fake B because they'll over rotate, blah, 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 all that stuff. You can start training someone to do that. But what happens when you call a default and one of your players gets picked off by their opper, for example, you're in a 4v5, what do you call then? When you can't like just do something that you were prepared to, you need to improvise. Not every player is capable of doing that. You know, I think that's why in-game leaders rise over time. You can't simply pick a player and say, okay, now you become an in-game leader and you do this for us, right? So I think that's actually the bigger problem than them like teaching them to an extent. Teaching someone those patterns in, you know, mid-round and all that stuff, what you should go for most of the time, that like takes a lot of time, and someone really needs to have at least a little bit of talent for it.
Yeah, I think that's the key thing as well. Like some of it is just intuitive stuff that you can't really be taught in a lot of ways. So I think that's where you know that little bit of talent comes in and eventually plays a massive part, because players, depending on obviously like what kind of players they are, if they are cerebral players or very good at adapting, just their play style, like, you know, from game to game and situation to situation, doesn't necessarily mean that they can translate that over into actually leading your entire team and making those adjustments at the right time. I think that's why, like, especially a lot of us who've played at a high level hold in-game leaders to such a high regard, to the point where, again, you allow them to make a couple of mistakes individually. From that aspect, if you see that they actually make active adjustments during a game for the betterment of the team.
Actually, one of the rare people who made that transition very well is actually MSL. Like, he was in a team with Glaive early on, the Western Wolves team, right, where Glaive was the main caller. MSL was maybe the secondary caller, I don't know that for sure, but he wasn't like an in-game leader. And then with all of those roster changes and so on in the Danish scene, he was kind of forced to become an in-game leader. And, you know, for a year, they were pretty much irrelevant, like in the international scene. They weren't a bad team, but not really someone who's going to make any waves. But with time, you know, he kind of grew into the role. And maybe exists another example, because in 1.6, I don't think he was a caller either. I think he was playing Pronax for a good while.
Well, he was at the very end of the Fnatic reign in 1.6. But at that point, I think, I can't remember who said that, if it was Karn or Lurpus, but somebody mentioned the fact that towards the end of 1.6, it wasn't necessarily down to the in-game leaders' mid-game calls and that kind of thing that would really decide the game. It was more down to the fact that you had 5 beast players who were just shooting stuff everywhere.
Well, so I was just looking over the list, because I think this is going to be like a decent transition, because almost all of these teams, with the exception of G2, are going to be in Katowice soon. And Janka, you're going to be there. Natu's going to be there. Moses is going to be there. That's like the Room on Fire representation at that event. And I think it's going to be super interesting. I'm really looking forward to it. For partly because of all these storylines. Obviously, SK look really cool with Phelps. I think everyone can agree with that. Like, Phelps just, for some reason, just fits into it. More credit to Fallen for somehow doing it again, just picking up new people and not having the team break. Virtus.pro, exceptional. Astralis, it's going to be so much fun when VP play Astralis again if they do that in the tournament. Now, I was just looking at the list of teams that NIP are going to be playing, right? Okay, so one thing, we've obviously got Fnatic, and we've got Na'Vi there as well, but we also have, and I think this is interesting, we've got FaZe with Nico, right? So there's that going on. There's so many storylines here. So let me just read you out on the first day, the teams that NIP are going to be playing first. Fnatic, then Astralis, then FaZe, then Immortals. Like, isn't there a chance that I think a chance that NIP could lose literally every one of these games? They're all best of one, right? So it could get really rough. Like, how many of these teams, just the ones that were at Dreamhack, how many of them can make an improvement into Katowice? It's not that much time. It's really not a lot of time. So are we going to see FaZe be better with Nico? Is Na'Vi going to play better? Are Fnatic going to come in and do a lot of work here? I just don't know. I think it's crazy.
I mean, well, in the case of FaZe, I think Not that they had a poor showing with Jacob at Las Vegas, given limited time to prepare and whatnot, with AZ going to North, but I think they're kind of bound to do better. Simply because you saw what Nico could do at Vegas, right? He can single-handedly win you games. And it's like you said, it's best of ones. Nico, if you have a Nico on form, that might be all you need, really, to win a game. That's how ridiculous he is.
Finally, me and Van can be excited about the same team.
Yeah.
With Rain and Nico in the team. I think that FaZe can do well. I think they can make it out of groups, despite Nico being with the team for only a week. He didn't practice with FaZe before Vegas, so he was practicing with Mouse for that tournament, for anyone who might be wondering. But I actually feel that Kerrigan is one of those in-game leaders who could do a good job of improvising. I think he actually proved that when he joined FaZe initially. They didn't have a lot of time to practice, and they did a lot of work. In contrast to someone like perhaps, I don't know, maybe MSL. I feel like maybe he's a guy who would like more time to get the game polished. But yeah, I think that can be a very, very difficult task for NIP. I think the two biggest question marks or three question marks in terms of teams, okay, let's say 2 out of each group, is NIP and Immortals from Group A, because the new Immortals with FNX, it will be cool to see how they're gonna look. NIP, if they have another bad run, if they drop out of the groups here, you wonder is that when they make another roster change, or what happens with the team? While in Group B, Heroic will be interesting to see with Yugi now being able to actually play for the team. And then you have Cloud9 and Na'Vi, both teams who seem a bit dysfunctional at the moment, right? So same story as with NIP, especially with Na'Vi. Listening to the players' interviews at Vegas, there's obviously some issues within the team. So if they have a bad showing in Katowice, what do they do? So
the weird part to me is that, we talk about whether or not teams would need to make changes if they, have a bad run at Katowice, but both groups are so fucking stacked that it's not necessarily a sign of you being bad if you go out in groups.
No, I agree. Actually,
that's the fucked up thing, right? So,
but can CS players be that
reasonable?
Yeah.
I don't know. I kind of hope so, but it's like you said, NIP's first 3 games is Fnatic, Astralis, and FaZe, right?
Yeah. Well, they play Optic at the end actually too.
Oh yeah. Well, yeah, to finish
up,
up the group. But if they start off 0-3 versus Astralis, Fnatic, and FaZe, that's probably group advancement gone, right?
Yeah.
So, I wouldn't say that necessarily it's been a poor showing if they go 0-3 in those games. If they have good games and close games versus these 3 teams, that's definitely something that you can actually take to heart and actually bring with you forward. It doesn't necessarily mean you're a complete failure. Sometimes the cookie just doesn't crumble your way, right?
Maybe that's what we should put a little asterisk for everyone watching that tournament, is to say, maybe don't judge the teams that go out in the groups too hard just because of it, because it really is ridiculous. Almost all tournaments we have, there is one team that you could point to and say, well, that team's obviously going to get completely screwed in the groups. Yeah. Now it could be almost anyone with this format. It is kind of insane. I do still very much wish that G2 was in this tournament, just because it'd be even more ridiculous just to see what would happen. But actually, for their sake, I'm almost kind of glad that they're not, just because they get to really work on their stuff and really make the team work. I think it could be important. Whereas, I mean, for Fnatic, they said, we're going to refine our motivation, everything, but maybe they were another team that could have done with a tournament break. And because if you just keep getting tested and you keep failing, what if they fail at Masters and they go to Katowice and they fail there as well? Is there going to be a point where this Fnatic team just never even get to go off the ground because they keep getting put back on the spot again and again, and they never have time to redo anything?
Yeah, that's kind of the question I wanted to ask you guys, actually, considering the fact that especially when you're a team or a lineup that's been so used to success as well, the fact that all teams deal with adversity in different ways, but it's like you said, with a team like Fnatic, especially with the 5 men they have, whether or not they're going to be able to deal with the fact that they're going to potentially, get stomped out of groups twice in a row. That's completely unheard of. That just doesn't happen to those players. So if that's going to be too big of a hit for them to actually be able to again rediscover their motivation to the point where they can actually put in the hard work and and adapt. I'm actually a tiny bit worried, like, because of that aspect to it. I probably would have liked to see Fnatic take this tournament off and go the similar route as G2, give themselves more time to actually play together and just a non-pressured environment where they can just fuck around.
If they actually believe that they just need more time to practice, then Katowice doesn't matter that much for those teams, because like the whole of March is pretty much empty as far as it looks right now in terms of like
online leagues.
True. Yeah. So I mean, there's no LAN tournament, so you can play it and then be like, okay, we fucked up 2 tournaments in a row. We still got a month. Let's like grind it out now and see what happens, like April, May, whatever. But I think what you said about, you know, that you maybe think Fnatic will have problems with overcoming that, I think that just speaks more like praise to a team like VP, right? Who's like been able to, over 3 years, and they've had some periods when they were in a pretty bad state, like in slumps last year, obviously, and even a little bit, I think there was a period in 2015 where also they were a bit quiet for a while. So being able to overcome all of that and come back to be at the very top, I think it just shows maturity over anything else, you know, realizing that, we have a bad period because of X or Y, but they're able to pinpoint those problems, work on them, and, you know, fix those issues. And when you look at VP, you see a team that rarely, like, for example, you look at their T sides, rarely is it a situation where they are reliant on someone making an individual play for them to win the round, like straight off the bat. Sure, they like mid-round or late round, once the execute comes in or once they go for whatever they want to do on the map, maybe someone like gets a triple kill and that wins them the round. But they're not like reliant in the first 40 seconds. Okay, Snacks, you need to like lurk out of monster or overpass and win a duel, and that's how we'll win the round. Like something perhaps that Fnatic used to do with Olaf on B platform, on Cobble or on Train coming out of mid, right? So that way, it's more about having good coordination and being well practiced as a team and having confidence in your teammates. When you play more individualistic, it puts much more pressure on the players, obviously, to perform. But that playstyle is so reliant on confidence, and that's why teams like EnVyUs eventually, you know, dropped down, and Fnatic later on, because those players who were making those plays and making a difference, they started losing confidence, and in the end, that playstyle is just not viable if you don't have confidence that you're going to win your battles like 100% of the time.
Yeah, to me, VP are like that you know, old couple that's been together. They're about to celebrate their 60th anniversary together, right? You know, they've been bitching at each other for, you know, at least 55 of those years, but they're able to work it through. Sure. And then you have the lineups like Fnatic and potentially the G2s, right? Like the very individualistic teams. They're like the celebrity newlyweds couple that last about 3 months before everything just goes to shit.
And Vegas wedding.
Yeah, exactly, right? Like, yeah, what happens in Vegas, all that stuff. That's kind of how it feels to me. And I think it works out kind of nice as well in the sense that you don't have a lot of couples that, you know, make it to a 60th anniversary. That doesn't happen a lot, and you don't see teams like VP happen. I can't actually think of any sort of equivalent to VP in any other esport.
No, I don't think there is one. I think it's something that people pointed out for a while. I mean, in some ways, even outside of VP, Counter-Strike is a bit unique in that sense, right? Because it's very common in other lineups that you just almost reform the whole team the second you lose the tournament, you know? I think maybe Dota, because of the immense gravity of the international, it's so, you just feel like, well, if we're not going to be able to win the international, we might as well just make a new team, and then, you know, we'll try next time. So it is, I think in that sense, it's true. There's something going on there. But yeah, even outside of, you know, we're talking about the confidence of a whole team to play like an Envy or a Fnatic sort of style. But even for just individual players, I actually always worry whenever I see like a new star come up that plays that type of game, because I always think there's a chance this can work for like a couple of months, and then that's the end of it. The one that I was scared about this happening was Config, actually. Because to me, he looked like one of those players that was just, yeah, I'm just going to run through smoke and flash my way in, and I'll take any battle with anyone any day. And he was winning all of them. You know, some of these games that he played were so ridiculous, right? But I could see a future in which Config would be like a couple of weeks ago, where he would have been, you know, one of those players that just got zoned out by a Snacks, or someone who is a smarter player, who just sort of internalizes the pattern and knows how to play, and then, you know, suddenly Config can't do anything. Now, I will happily say now, I do think Config sort of managed to outlive that and has managed to actually already sort of modulate his own game a bit. So that's good news. But I think it's maybe it's the easiest way to get to the top of Counter-Strike individually is to be super confident and just play all in every single game. But I think it's also the style that's very hard to change out of, both for teams and players, because all you do is remember the one time that it worked, right? But kind of like if you're, you know, doing the all-in style in poker or something, right? You remember that one time you won the big hand and it really worked out, right?
Yeah.
You can't get out of it. So
it kind of seems like that's the thing with Danish players, though, because I had similar thoughts about Valde as well.
Yeah.
When he came out to the scene, like similar type of player, super confident in his ability to the point where it doesn't seem like it phases him, the fact that, you know, he's playing, for instance, an heroic, right? So not necessarily one of the absolute top tier teams, and he's going up against, you know, let's say a Snacks. Like at this point, to him, that could have been, you know, Mr. Headshot Master 2017 on matchmaking. It would, well, it wouldn't matter to him, right? Like to him, it's all the same. It's still the same playing field, still the same game. So he doesn't really care. Yeah. So, but obviously, I would understand if God didn't, you know, put the fear in him, but, you know, for the better part of it, Valde just didn't seem to care, and he's also kind of shown, you know, gotten through that, like weird period where you're not really sure if he's actually a legitimately good player, in terms from like an all-round perspective, or if he's just someone who can shoot really hard.
Yeah, I think that's interesting, and I think it's certainly something to keep an eye on. I think other players actually now, because we've been neglecting Cloud9, and they are going to be playing in Poland as well. Both Studio and Automatic, I had similar fears of. I definitely thought at the beginning, because Studio was just such a good meme, you know. But yeah, I thought there was a similar fate waiting for them, where once the initial hype and the initial glory of being that guy who just, you know, does the crazy things every round. Once the novelty of that sort of wears off and everyone's like, yeah, well, we know that it's coming now, so you can't do it anymore, but they still play very well. So it's good to see that there are people who can transition out of it. I just want to see the Fnatic team make some sort of reasonable adjustment, and then maybe keep some of the old tricks in there. I mean, if you have a JW on your team, I want you to put him into the best role possible, right? But maybe not have the whole team play the way that they once did. Although obviously, if they can, then, you know, we'll
go for it.
Our words. Yeah, like if it works in Katowice, then it's gonna be tons of fun. Who has an opinion? Who's gonna win this tournament? I realize that's an easy question given the lineup of teams, but I feel like someone's gonna have to put their name on the line here.
I'm gonna be super boring again. I did this prior to Vegas as well, when we were asked to give like two favorites and a dark horse. I picked Astralis, VP, and SK. But I think it's going to be the same thing, and that's obviously not necessarily. Doesn't mean that, you know, VP aren't necessarily going to have to grind out a best of three where they, you know, come back from like being against match point on the third map and then go on to win and make it to the finals or anything. But they haven't really. Like, none of those three teams have really shown any decisive weakness to the point where you can actually put them out of contention, right? And that's the big thing for me, because all the other teams have had gaps in their play or certain maps during recent tournaments where everything just falls apart for them, like in an epic way. So for me, it's gonna be those three. But I think actually, you know, outside of the favorites, the most interesting team to me to watch outside of FaZe is actually Mortals. Because we talked about, you know, that teams bring on new players and they can be like a spark plug or anything, but Immortals, in their sense, they've gone a different route of, you know, going away from having that hot talent in Phelps and getting probably one of the most reliable players you can ask for in the world in FNX. And It's going to be really, really cool to see how Immortals actually utilize FNX, if he's going to have a more similar role to what he did in Mid in Brazil, his Mid in Brazil days, or if he's going to be used in the same fashion as he was in SK. Is this going to be the return of FNX, who's like a hard carry kind of style, or is he just going to be the glue guy for the team? So I'm super excited about that.
All right, Immortals as your potential dark horse outlier.
At least to make it through groups. I think they can fuck up something in Group A.
All right. What do you think, Yanko? You're going to go with the trifecta, the SK, Astralis, Virtus.pro top 3 type thing?
Yeah, I think it's hard to pick anyone else. I think those teams are just they've singled out themselves as like being the best. I'm so impressed by SK. It's like, sure, it's just one player being switched around, but being able to like make semifinals of a major and the grand finals of a tournament like Vegas, that's just insane. You would probably feel like if they make the playoffs, that's fine. You would expect that from a team like SK. They have like good players and everything, but to run so deep in a tournament with so little time to actually practice with the guy, I think that's super impressive. And that's also what I realized in Vegas. Like, I was thinking SK is gonna really walk over Navi in that quarterfinal, but then I realized like some of these matchups, no matter like how objectively one team is better than the other at the moment, sometimes like it always turns out to be an epic game, basically. So same with like VP Astralis, SK VP and all of that stuff. So yeah, I think those are the clear favorites for the tournament. Besides that, I'm looking towards Heroic. I think they're definitely going to make some best of one upsets. And also, I'm very interested to see how Optic will look like, because at this tournament, it's like the Valve coaching rules. So Peacemaker can't really talk, can't really help the team that much. So it's going to have to be Naf leading the team majority of the time, which is going to be super interesting to see how that pans out for them.
All right. Okay. So you guys have always picked very reasonable teams.
We're those guys.
You are those guys. And I've been riding the Danish train for a while now, and I feel like it's been worth it. They've been doing a pretty good job both on the North and Australis side. But
so why not bring on a third? Is that what you're saying?
So
Heroic top 3?
No, I'm gonna pick FaZe to win it. I'm just no top 3 type shit here. Just
wait, FaZe to win it without a Dane on the team?
Without a Dane on the team. And I'll tell you why.
But.
So obviously, I could just obviously no one takes my prediction seriously anyway, so I've got really nothing writing on this.
Least of all you.
Least of all me. But
I mean, you were right about Astralis, so
I was right, and that will forever be my moment, right? But I'll tell you why. So I think there's a very good chance that FaZe will sneak through this group stage. I think their sort of their matches are looking, to me, very reasonable. Like, they play Immortals, then they play Fnatic, then they play NiP, and then they play Optic, and then they play Astralis at the end. So I think there's a very good chance that FaZe will sneak through this group stage. Best of ones, you have Nico playing now. I think it's going to be pretty sick. Now, then you get to the playoffs, and because everybody, including everyone watching this VOD, will already know that Astralis, Virtus.pro, SK, North maybe, obviously Navi's still going to be dangerous, but they played very well in Vegas, and I think Immortals too to some extent. Like, those are all the teams that you will have prepared for if you're one of the other teams, right? Those are the teams you want to wait till it's the finals to FaZe, right? But I think FaZe, because they have a new player and because they're so weird, how do you necessarily prepare for them? I think that they have a chance because they're going to fly a bit under the radar from everybody else. If you're Astralis and there's a chance you could end up playing VP or something in the quarterfinals, you got to be damn sure that you're ready for that game. Maybe less so with FaZe. So I think that's how they're going to sneak through. Someone's going to have to do the crazy say predictions. We can't all just say
that's true.
See, Anders, this is what worries me. It's not the fact that you say FaZe is going to win, it's that you're actually trying to apply some reasoning behind it.
Listen,
it's like...
It's not like the Astralis call 7 months ago. Just like, Astralis is going to win the next major.
But they were some dog shit, of course.
Yeah. Also, just the fact that Nico is a fucking god, isn't he? So
yeah,
I'm just gonna.
Actually, okay. So that's something we haven't touched on, obviously, but obviously, very different kind of team that Nico had in Mouse Sports compared to what he's getting into with FaZe right now. But with Mouse Sports, it was Nico, and that was the end-all be-all for 90% of the games that they played. It was on him to win them the game, and if he couldn't put out an absolutely insane performance, it wouldn't go Mouse Sports' way. Do you see any of the players who are currently in FaZe potentially taking a dip or getting better in terms of performance as a result of Nico coming into the team? Because you could see, for instance, what Oscar is able to do when Nico is able to create so much havoc around the map. It does allow for certain players to have a lot easier of an environment to perform better. Do you think that's going to be the case for FaZe, or do you think it's going to be a case of too many cooks?
No,
when he plays with them.
I'll give a quick rundown. I think the reason why this can actually really work is that I think both Alu and Kiyoshima and Rain are smart players in the sense that they will know how to use Nico in a good way. Like, I think Alu is obviously a very good player, but I think he's very good at keeping his own ego in check when it comes to whether or not it's supposed to be him or some. I don't think he cares that much whether it's him or someone else getting the triple kill in any one given round. But yeah, I think he just wants to set up the best plays at any time. I think Rain is very much of the same mentality. I think Kiyoshima is going to listen to whatever the other two guys have to say, and I think Karrigan's. I think this. Actually, in some weird, bizarre way, this team is pretty much well set for having someone like Nico come in. I think Nico himself you can easily sort of, talk to him if you do need to change the roles around. Like, it's not that I think that he's coming in with some, mega hyped ego that cannot be kept under control and everyone just has to move out of the way or anything. But I think if they were smart, then they obviously use Nico for the super weapon that he is. And I think they've got the players for it.
So who do you see, just obviously this is pure theory crafting, but who do you see benefiting the most out of the FaZe players from Nico coming in? Who do you think is going to make most out of the space given by Nico to perform better?
Probably Alu, I think, because he's playing because of the role he's playing, just because of the AWPing role.
Yep.
Like, I think the other teams will have to use more resources trying to shut down Nico, and then I think Alu's the most likely candidate to step it up. And plus, I think there's a bigger chance that Kyo and Rain are going to be helping Nico out whatever he needs it. So yeah, that's my quick answer to that. Yeah, I think it makes sense.
Yanko?
What do you think, Yanko?
Yeah.
I think when Nico, Destroyer of Worlds, comes into FaZe, of course, Destroyer of Teams, because everything has to revolve around him, and no one else can play their own game, right? No, I mean, I think like the player who's going to benefit the most maybe would be someone like Rain, because you can have Nico like doing his own thing, let's say on Mirage, going mid and trying to get a kill there on the T side, maybe connector or something like that. And then you can have Rain being a ramp and just waiting for Nico like to make that play to draw some attention to himself. And then Rain can go for like a 1v1 duel on the A bomb site or something like that. And at that one particular thing, like on Mirage A ramp, he's actually like super good at either like sneaking his way through and just like backstabbing someone or getting a kill. So also in that scenario, if you have a guy like Kiyoshima going apps, then like that trio combined with like Rain and Kyo working the A bomb side, that can be like extremely powerful, because as Van pointed out, they're like, they're like smart players that they will know like the timings, they will know how to react to things happening on the map. So I'm super excited to see how FaZe will look like, not necessarily in Katowice. In Katowice, maybe because they're going to play more loose, I guess, right? Because they are not going to have time to practice. And like that team playing loose is also super scary. I mean, when you look at the skill that they possess in the team. So I think with just the firepower and the role distribution within the team, I think that FaZe can definitely be a contender like for titles in a couple of months' time. Yeah. The only thing that was like, when I look at that team, the only like downside I see is like communication, and not like in a sense that people can't understand each other, even though it's everyone's second language. It's like the small things when it's like, you have like a fraction of a second to call something and you're not sure like how to say that exact position maybe, and you say like right, or like under the train, like behind the train, or something like that. And some minor communication issues like that. But I just feel like they have, a very well-rounded team in terms of roles, in terms of skill, in terms of the personalities, the mentalities of the players as well. So yeah, I think it's going to be good times for FaZe. FaZe up, motherfuckers.
I look forward to it. I definitely do. I think it's going to be.
Just like
it's
that.
gonna be interesting.
Crit blocking, like. There you go. Yeah.
Like this, maybe the other way.
I
I'm
guess
not sure
yeah.
The camera might be.
Exactly.
You got to learn that, Yanko. You got to learn that before Poland. Make that a promise.
Well, someone can take you to school on that. Just like set up a Skype chat. Just.
Absolutely. All right. We did have some questions from people on Twitter as well. Most of them fairly obnoxious. Like there was one I think that tagged Yanko that says, "Why is VP successful when their players are below average?"
Yeah.
What?
Reasonable. Definitely reasonable.
My God. That. Yeah. So that's that one. So I think we covered most of the other ones. The one I guess that we didn't cover just because they weren't really relevant for these 2 weeks here is Scream joining EnVy, right?
Yeah.
Do we want to give some quick thoughts about that? I think it's also at the top of HLTV, so we might as well just quickly say something. Is that team going to work? RPK, Scream, Happy, Sixer, XMS?
I mean, go.
Well, okay, I said this in the preview to Las Vegas when we touched on the topic. I think that was before they officially announced the signing of Scream, but obviously we had the 4 others to go off of. It's not a bad team. It's not bad players. If you have a lineup with Happy, RPK, XMS, and Sixer, that's not a bad team at all. And obviously adding Scream and seeing what he's able to do at times, in a sense, he's like a more inconsistent version of Nico in that sense. Like he has the potential to win you a game all by his lonesome. But it doesn't happen as a high rate as it does with Nico, right? So EnVy, I see them being the kind of team that goes to a lot of tournaments, perhaps get to the point where they get invited to a lot of tournaments, probably make playoffs in a couple of groups. Never going to win a tournament, but they're definitely going to fuck up one of the potential contenders.
The new Hellraisers, in other words.
Yeah, exactly. They're going to be like that shitty team and again, shitty team in. Not literally, but they're going to be that team that
shit confirmed. Vendetta.
Yeah, confirmed no streak. But no, they're not going to be the team that anybody wants to play ever. There's always going to be that team if you could play potentially a more structured team or something that you can potentially know what to expect from. I think you'd rather go into that than just having the uncertainty of what the fuck is going to happen with this EnVy team. So, yeah, I don't think anyone would like to play EnVy in that sense.
I feel like there's 2 ways this EnVyUs team can go, right? One way is like to the bottom of the ocean, basically, where you have like Happy still like being the in-game leader, still like the same style of the old EnVyUs lineup, like that very, very passive lurk style, the same play style of the team. Have Sixer who's going to be like an average opper at best, even though he was like a force to be reckoned with in 1.6. You have Scream who can be like super good but also inconsistent. You have RPK who's like the very solid player on the team, but can he really like take it to the next level and be like the star of the team behind Scream? And you have XMS who came from LDLC and is yet to prove himself, like consistently playing against the best teams in the world. The other direction that EnVyUs can go is like sky high to the stars, as Astralis likes to say, where you have like all these players super fired up after being like left out in the shuffle. Scream wants to like show everyone he can be like the best player in the world when the team is built around him. Like Happy revolutionizes his game, becomes more aggressive. RPK becomes the RPK of Source, right? Sixer like becomes. I don't think there's a world where Sixer in like the next 6 months or a year can become like a world-class soper, but he can just be like above average, for this team. That could be great. Yeah. And XMS as someone who fills in the gaps required. In that case, you can see like this team doing a lot of damage because you have like Happy, 2-time major champion. You have Scream, one of the most skilled mechanical players. RPK, a good all-arounder. So but I feel it's going to be either of the two. I don't think there's like a middle ground for this team, unfortunately, because this team was kind of forced to be made, right? They were left out, and it was like, okay, who can we get in the team? Okay, RPK, Sixer, and Happy. They were like the first three. Scream, then where was he gonna go? FaZe or somewhere else or whatever. Now he comes to the team, and they just like take XMS as well. So the last but not least that needs to be mentioned here is Devo Duvek, who was initially supposed to be the player on the team, but when Scream was available, he got signed instead. And I just want to say, he has a fucking Balkan surname, so probably has like some roots from around here, and our people always get fucked, Anders, and that has to stop now. Why wasn't it XMS? Why is it like the Dobrosavljevic?
Okay, listen. So, this surname is, you cannot pronounce this surname.
What?
There's no way.
Dobrosavljevic.
Of course.
Say that again.
Why the fuck can you say that, Anders?
Dobrosavljevic. David Dobrosavljevic.
All right.
AKA Devo Duvek.
All right. That's excellent.
Yeah,
he did kind of get screwed, didn't he? Like when Scream shows up, there's no way that you're gonna.
It's okay, Anders. It's not like it's your job to pronounce people's names.
Listen, I'm glad that he at least chose a reasonable player name. Like that's at least something we can work with, right?
Hates the Balkan countries, Anders.
Yeah, not like the Danish players who now all want to be called Nico, even though we already had like one Danish player, and we have a sort of like Bosnian player, and then we also have the Nico of Heroic. So
there's gonna be more Nikos for sure.
Why?
No, I mean already before all of that, you had the Swedish Nico as well.
No, now we're gonna have like the resurgence of nicknames like Megaton, Hyper,
Magix,
Executor, those like old school nicknames that people think everyone forgot about.
At least
you mean like Scream?
Yes, that's a good one.
Why can't we have it like in Chinese though? So when they're just called like numbers, like.
Oh, dude, I love that. Even though it makes it absolutely terrible to talk about them, it's like, it's amazing. I'm always fascinated when I see Chinese tournaments being played, and you see like the match list on HLTV, and you go like click on the match pages, and you see like one guy's just straight up called like Forests, like because why the fuck not, right? And then you have another guy called December 1482 SSG 65. Like, how the fuck do you come up with this name? Literally makes no sense at all. I'm pretty sure like a lot of them just like hit up like either go on Wikipedia, hit random page, and just like take the headline from whatever article they get up, and that's it. Yeah, I feel like a lot of people go that route because there's no explanation to the numbers things. It doesn't make sense to me at all, but it's fun though.
Well, on that note, did we skip anything? I feel like we could sort of talk about future tournaments, but they're so far off now. I think the next big tournament that's coming out of Katowice is Star Series at the beginning of April. So I think we should just leave that to the future, especially because we obviously want to know what's going to happen in Katowice and everything. I definitely look forward to it, and I hope you guys do too. Do you guys have any closing, any final words, anything we forgot to mention? I mean, I feel like
7 out of 7 in playoff predictions at Las Vegas.
Predictions matter.
All right.
Hashtag predictions matter.
Yeah.
I like that. That's pretty good. That's pretty good. I think Duncan was on a real roll as well for that tournament for predictions. So yeah. Not bad.
Then the semifinals came, Anders. Then the semifinals came.
Yeah, and he forgot what Danish Counter-Strike was about. So it was a shame. A shame.
A lot of people though.
Yes.
A lot of people go on that.
Danish Counter-Strike, a powerful drug.
Very much so. Well, I think I've covered most of the stuff that I wanted to talk about anyway. So I think we should leave it at that and look forward to seeing what happens in Poland. I certainly will. Very much so. It's the first time that I've had any time off in like 4 years, more or less. So it's going to be pretty good to just sit down and see what's happening. And I very much look forward to it. Hope you guys do too, obviously. Please subscribe to the YouTube channel and follow us on all the social media. There'll be links all over the place. So definitely go and do that. And look forward to seeing you again. So thank you for watching and have a good time.